Hello, my name is Corey Brock, and this is my case study for EDL 851. Who's involved? I'm summarizing the case. Mr. Brock, me, the principal. Mrs. Stevens, teacher that was being evaluated. The teacher's a supervisor. It was mentioned in the article. What is happening? I've been doing classroom observations. One teacher in concern, Mrs. Stevens. I visited her classroom several times. She is intelligent and has a great background in her subject matter. She's experienced trouble with pupil control. It seems to me that students have a lack of respect towards Mrs. Stevens. There's a lack of student involvement. She has a hard time motivating her students. I've held a post-observation meeting with Mrs. Stevens. During that meeting, she seemed irritable, defensive, and hostile. She placed the blame on me for the reason students did not participate in class activities when I was present. Summarize the case. Mrs. Stevens refused to accept any inadequacies in her teaching. I revisited her classroom before I made my final recommendation. It was either rehire or non-renewal. When I was in there, I seen no improvement. I seen the same problems. She had a lot of lecture time and limited student involvement. I decided not to renew Mrs. Stevens. If renewed, Mrs. Stevens would be granted tenured, and that means she could be at the school long term. I met with Mrs. Stevens again, and during this meeting, she disagreed with the evaluation. She stated that she is a better teacher than what I put on the evaluation, and that my presence makes her nervous. She also stated that I never taught her classes, so I don't know how to run it. I never gave her any ideas how to involve the students more, and her supervisor also never gave her any help. Mrs. Stevens left the meeting stating that she is going to fight the evaluation, and if it needs to go to court, it will. Report. Mrs. Stevens had her contract non-renewed for next year. She stated that she's going to fight her evaluation. She stated it was unfair and inaccurate. She also said that she will take it to court if necessary. Main idea. After several observations, Mrs. Stevens lacks proper classroom management, student involvement, and overall teaching ability to be retained by our school. Even though she disputes this claim, I feel it is in our students' best interest if she not be rehired. Facts. What we know. People involved, Mrs. Stevens, the teacher, Mr. Brock, me, the principal, Mrs. Stevens, students in her classroom, and Mrs. Stevens, supervisor. Though very limited, talked about in the article. Place, I assume it's a middle school or high school because in the article it talked about having class periods. Review and prioritize the information. This conflict could be damaging to our school if it does get taken to court or the teachers union. It could cost us legal fees and not sure how it'll look in the community if we take action on a teacher. Mrs. Stevens and myself have the most important stake in the outcome. If the union or court feels that I didn't do a good job, I will lose the trust of my staff and superiors and possibly lose my job. If the union or court feel that I did my due diligence, then Mrs. Stevens will lose her job. I feel that I don't believe all stakeholders have been consulted. I feel like the principal should have talked and met with Mrs. Stevens' supervisor to get their opinion on how they feel Mrs. Stevens is doing and if they correlate to what I'm observing. I can visit with Mrs. Stevens' supervisor and her students to get a better feel on how her class is being managed when I'm not in there. I feel like I have enough of my own observations to make the decision, but I would be able to make more informed decisions if I talk to other stakeholders involved. I also feel like the evaluation form is very vague and not very objective. It doesn't have specific actions to be looking for as an evaluator. So it makes it very subjective and it could cause problems, as in this case study. If I take no action, I could not care about how Mrs. Stevens is managing her classroom and renew her to come back in our district. I could send it to the district office and let them handle it. Liberal action. I could fire her immediately. Intermediate strategies. I could talk with her supervisor. I could meet again with Mrs. Stevens and give actionable feedback on how to improve teaching and classroom management. We could set up goals. I can give Mrs. Stevens a plan of improvement. I could set her up with a mentor teacher that is great with classroom management and teaches her subject matter. I can also have someone else evaluate her to see if they see the same thing. Evaluation. What choices do I have? If I take no action, I renew Mrs. Stevens. Pro, she may become a better teacher. Cons, Mrs. Stevens gets tenure and you're stuck with her unless you go through due process or she leaves. I believe student success may suffer if this happens. If I take no action and send to the district office, they handle the situation from here on out. I could lose the integrity and reputation by passing the buck to someone else. If I fire her immediately, pros can hopefully find a quality teacher to replace her. Hopefully students can be more engaged in the classroom. Con, I'd have to find a sub to cover until you find a replacement. Con, you fire a teacher. This is someone's life that you're talking about. Con, a staff and district office may lose confidence in your ability to lead the school or staff. Intermediate strategies. If I talk with your supervisor, pro, I'd have more complete understanding on maybe how Mrs. Stevens teaches. It gives me more than my viewpoint. I can meet again with Mrs. Stevens to give actionable feedback on how to improve teaching and classroom management. We can set up goals. Pro, we become a team and she understands that we are working together. Pro, it gives her a voice. Pro, she knows what is expected of her in the classroom. Con, she can still believe there's nothing wrong and that I'm not being fair. I could give Mrs. Stevens a plan of improvement. Pro, it gives her a chance to remediate her teaching and classroom management. Con, she may feel belittled by having to be on the plan and not fully buying in. I could set her up with a mentor teacher that is great with classroom management and teaches her subject matter. This gets her help from someone that has taught her classes and hasn't done it successfully. She may listen more. Pro, she's more apt to change and listen to suggestions. Con, she may not think she needs the help and refuse to listen. I could have someone else evaluate Mrs. Stevens to see if they get the same results. Pro, I'm able to identify if there's a problem with her teaching classroom management. Pro, she may be able to take the criticism if more than one person evaluates it. Con, I may not be a very good evaluator and work on my skills if they find nothing to be wrong. After evaluating all the options, I have decided to implement a combined option. I'm going to meet with Mrs. Stevens again and develop a set of goals from the actionable feedback that I'm going to give to her. I'm also going to assign her a mentor teacher that will supervise her a couple times. This plan can be implemented by talking to Mrs. Stevens and explain that I want to make sure I get this decision right. And that if I haven't given you any ideas, then we need to work together. I would also include the mentor in this conversation and explain what they're going to do. Plan of action implementation. After talking it over with my supervisor and see if I can get an extension, I'm going to meet with Mrs. Stevens again and let her know what we're going to do and give her some actionable feedback, something that she can actually see specific behaviors that I would like to see implemented into the classroom. I realized that I wasn't specific in what I wanted Mrs. Stevens to do, and it caused frustrations on her part. I said I wanted more involvement with the students, but she thought she was. So there was a communication issue between us. I'm also going to assign her a mentor teacher evaluator. Mrs. Stevens says that I intimidate her and her students when I am in the classroom. So I'm going to assign someone to help with the suggestions we have given her and help me evaluate. That way there are two viewpoints on how she is running her classroom. And hopefully it's not an intimidation factor when they're in their classroom. I'm going to let Mrs. Stevens know that she's going to have 9 weeks before I come evaluate. I would like for her to meet with her mentor teacher once a week or once every couple of weeks to talk about anything she feels needs addressed in an informal setting. Again, I don't want Mrs. Stevens to feel attacked or or intimidation. My hope is that as I admit I should have been more specific in my expectations, that Mrs. Stevens feels that we are working together and I'm not trying to look for just the negatives in her classroom, and I want her to succeed. If we can have honest communication and I can tell she is trying to improve and work with me, I can work with someone like that. I can give them chances. If she can't, then I'm going to have to document more, and make the suggestion for non-renew. I'm hoping we can avoid this. I can help and work with a teacher that is willing to listen to improve. But if not, we're going to have to go in a different direction, even if it's through due process. I hope my administration doesn't lose confidence in my ability, but if I can admit that I was wrong and willing to work on my weakness, that they will continue to trust me. Reflection. This class has really taught me the value in supervision and evaluation of your staff. You have to observe more than just the need to times. The times that, your evaluation is up for, and we need to enter it in KSDE. Go visit the classroom on a regular basis, so it's not weird when you come in to evaluate for the kids or the teacher. Also, communication is key. Like this whole assignment, you have to give actionable feedback, or it could cause some issues if you don't. The two biggest takeaways from this class is to be visible in the classroom. Don't let the first time being there is the time that you have to do the evaluations. How do you know what is going on in your school if you're not out and about in the hallways, classrooms, lunchroom? Communication is critical. Everyone needs to be on the same page with everything, the good and the bad. Don't let your staff to assume where they stand. They should know by talking with you. You know what happens when people assume. I really like this class, and I can't wait to be able to use what I've learned. It'll even help me when I'm an athletic director right now. I need to give more actionable feedback to my coaches, and not just at the end of the year. Call them in, have bi-weekly meetings or something. So I want to thank you, and I hope you have a great holiday break.